Good afternoon,
Right.
everyone. It's Tom Sydney Bushnell, aka Numbers, here from the Tom Numbers Show and in association with Psych.Club, both my channels on YouTube. But we're going to do this as we did before. We're going to put this out on my locals channel so we can talk unhindered. We can say what we need to say on, and if we need to change anything for the masses, we'll do that later, but freely. So what have you got for us today, buddy?
Well, you saw that we had, I sent you a little something over about the numbers when President Trump announced World War III. Did you see that?
Was that the one you sent last night?
Yeah, and so it's kind of an interesting thing. President Trump's numbers have always been
oh yeah,
the dog's
yeah,
having a fun day.
the 777, and
well,
yes.
This is important because that's kind of a brand for President Trump. His first day in office was his 70th year, 7th month, 7th day alive on planet Earth since his birth. And so, those numbers are his numbers, the seventh number of completeness, perfection, etc. 7 days. There's 6 days that God labored and the 7th day rested to make a complete week. And so this 777 kind of a theme has been something that we see repeating itself over and over when you look behind the scenes at numbers for President Trump. And that's why it's interesting. The article that I sent you, the person has kind of gone in and looked at some of the other occasions where it's actually not a super exhaustive one. I've seen stuff that's pages of the 777. Maybe some of them stretched it a little bit, so you kind of got to take it all with a grain of salt at some point. But the main thing is that his first full day in office was January 21st of 2017. So we're not counting Inauguration Day. We're counting the day after, which was his first full day in office. And that's the 70th year, 7th month, 7th day. The article that I sent you is noting the fact that when President Trump said that, it's World War III, which I would disagree with the people doing the stuff for him. They should say World War IV. We won World War III. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. Take a bow. But when they made that little thing the other day, when Trump said that 2 days ago in his meme, that was 77 years, 7 months, and 7 days since the end of World War II, when Japan surrendered officially at the end of World War II. So that's all really critical stuff because there's messaging going on behind the scenes to all the other players about where we're at, what's going on in the world. And with all the attacks on President Trump, people need to, kind of look at that and go, is he really sweating it that much? Or is he he has that Cheshire cat grin because he knows other things about what's coming, right?
Yeah.
So that's this, we're in a war. He's, it's not like there's not going to be some, it's not a kerfuffle. It's not a dust up. This is a fight to the death. One of us is going to make it. One of us isn't. And that's why I've used the imagery even of the bullfight.
I hope both you and me make it one.
Say again?
I hope both you and me make it.
Well, I think we will.
No, I was just playing with your wording.
Knowledge is power.
One of us will, one of us won't. I was like, well, hopefully we both make it.
I meant, yes, I got you. What he was referring to, what Trump is referring to is the deep state.
Yes.
And this machine that we're in conflict with. Every machination, every thing that they have in mind is about controlling the world's population, choking it down. All the, carbon credits. Okay, it's a legal construct. They've fabricated the science over a very long time. They've got the scientists, the guys at Epstein Island that were from all the universities. What were they doing? They're going back and helping put together these reports and making sure they read just right to further this legal fiction, scientific fiction, that humans are destroying the planet. It's heating up. It's going to, start melting because of human activity on the planet. And so we have to choke it back and come up with all sorts of schemes to reduce the amount of emissions. And humans make these emissions, so they need to be choked back in their activities, throttled. It's like in NASCAR, they have what they call restrictor plates, so that the engine can only get so much oxygen. They can build those cars' engines to go 300 miles an hour, but the tracks, the tires, everything else, they don't want that. It's just, they're at the extreme of safety. So the throttling factor here is, they only get so much gas to do the race, and they only get so much air per tank, to do the race. And so they have to do pit stops, which slows the race down. They have to can only go as fast as the air can get in the car. And when they do that, it damages, or I shouldn't say damage, but it restricts the overall speed. They're trying to put restrictions on the speed at which humankind grows and does stuff across the planet, which is, maybe in some locations we want to go a little bit slower, some areas, and it does make a lot of sense, because the growth is just going to overwhelm some areas. It's going to not be well thought out or planned or something like that. But on the whole, the world runs on energy, and what their real plan is to cut back the use of oil and gas, which are actually very efficient ways to get energy, and go to other things that are much less efficient. They're going to try and force everyone to become more efficient in these other areas, solar and things like that. That at the end of the day, there's only so much. So in some places, like I say, it does make sense, but overall, there's a scheme to make it harder to live. And one thing you have to remember, that they keep talking about the global warming. We're warming up the planet by our activities. We had a volcano last year that erupted down by Tonga, and it put more carbon in the atmosphere, as well as water, by the way, above 30,000 feet. Put 10% of the water that's in the atmosphere up in just a matter of days above 30,000 feet. And you got to think about what I'm saying. On the whole planet, this one little volcano spewed water, gushed water so high that it added 10% more water to the Earth's atmosphere above 30,000 feet. Not the stuff that's down in the normal cloud range that you see most of the time in an upper area, which is changing wind patterns on the planet. Now it's having a cumulative effect, heating and cooling. On other planets in the solar system, we see that over the last 50 years, the ice caps on Mars, for example, have receded. And now they're coming back again. But that was a natural thing that happened on Mars. What are you going to say? The electric rovers, electric rovers that we put on Mars suddenly changed the temperature of Mars? No, it's happening across the solar system. So saying that man's activities are increasing the Earth's temperature significantly is just BS. You have natural events that, you had Pinatubo you had all the carbon that was emitted by man's activities. Pinatubo was another volcano in the Philippines that when it erupted, it was so catastrophic. We ended up closing down our military base there in Pinatubo, our air base, because we couldn't fly in and out of there. That event a couple decades ago put more carbon in the air in just a day or two than all the carbon emitted by man in the last 100 years. So the amount that we're cutting back or twisting or changing is so insignificant, so incredibly insignificant, to be laughable, actually. I had meetings over the last couple of days where people were talking about how in 30 years that many island nations are going to be flooded over now if we don't change, our ways with to stop global warming. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? Oh yes, because I'm someplace that's a very small island, and they're only a few feet above water, ocean level. I was on the highway last night, and my vehicle has an altitude readout, and it was reading 6, 7, 9 feet. Oh, we're at the top of the mountain here for the island. You just have to think about that. They're saying that we're going to be flooded over. That's bullshit. If there's heating and it's occurring and it's going to melt the ice caps, okay, and you could have a water temperature rise, but it's not due to humans. The other thing is that, just as an aside, across North America, from Seattle to New York, you had an ice wall that was almost a mile high just 14,000 years ago, 12,000 BC. 1 mile high of ice, and that's all melted. It was gone, 3,000-4,000 years ago. It's been receding ever since. You had a great ice and water lake up over covering most all of Canada. A huge lake that broke out and created things like the Grand Canyon and other things. So with all of that in mind, what caused that? Was that somebody's SUV that caused all of those mile-high glaciers to erode? I mean, imagine being in downtown Seattle, where the Space Needle is, and some of those buildings, and they're a quarter mile high or something, and not even that, they're 1/8 of a mile high, and the ice went up beyond that, 7 times higher, solid, and it's all gone now. Well, okay, so what caused that warming? Okay. We just have to be realistic about it, and people doing these fabrications, it's really an attempt to get the whole world under these globalistas control. And energy, America uses energy more than anybody, so what are you going to do? You're gonna make America, whose business is business, stop doing business. You're going to run the gas price to $10, $12, $15 a gallon, and then you can't go anywhere. America is not like some of the European countries where they have, all this rail and bus stuff and all that. No trucks, for the average person. Little, it's all commercial. We're a pretty vast country, and so you're going to make farmers out in Timbuktu run electric trucks to carry heavy loads. It's never going to happen. It's not efficient, and very disruptive, at least not for the foreseeable future. You're just going to shut everything down till they figure it out 50 years from now. That's not working. So
lots of things you hit upon there, Juan. Starting off with the 777. So that 7 is 65, which is doves. But 777, so 65 times 3 is 195, which is Move the Mountain. It's the power number, 19.5. Christopher Nolan, the director for the Oppenheimer film, Cheshire Cat Grin, 147. The Trump card. A Cheshire Cat Grin is 148. Donald J. Trump. We've got the event in Cheshire this weekend. Well, Manchester. So maybe you can come over for it. And you talked about kerfuffle. So I wanted to ask you a question about kerfuffle, which I'll do in a second. And you're talking about the ice wall. So I've got a question. Well, there's a few questions. I wanted to ask about kerfuffle. I wanted to ask about the Earth. We did a great show a couple months ago about about the moon being a spaceship, and thinking that if that's a spaceship, I'm wondering if we're a bigger spaceship. So I wanted to dive into that. No,
you could say it in the most kind of extreme way, but not in the same sense. It's not built out as something. We do see pieces. A lot of what we're seeing as meteorites or comets like that is debris. I don't a lot, maybe a fraction of a percent, but there is stuff out there. Phobos and Deimos out at Mars clearly are artificial also, and they're in a decaying orbit. A lot of interesting stuff there, but some of the guys that have done amazing work out there, that keeps getting ignored. Some point it'll be a big deal, but it's not yet. So,
and super soldiers as well. Are super soldiers real? If we've got spaceships like the moon, do we have super soldiers that are a real concept? A lot of people believe that is, or that they are, or have been. I don't know if you've commented on super soldiers in the past.
Most of that is great imaginations. I will say this, the ability to augment someone's skills, capabilities, etc., strength is very real. There's lots of different technology for doing that. Even for augmenting your ability to, think clearly, quickly, etc. But and to genetically manipulate humans, we certainly do it with other animals. And while it may be, much of it would be illegal based on various international laws, the reality is that there are people doing it because it's needed and has been going on for a very long time. Lots of different things. Oh, hey, bro. So, there's a lot of things that are happening where what's allowed and what's actually going on are not the same thing. There's science that's being looked into modifying the human genome. My buddy's dog here is a clone. It was cloned from another dog that he had that was dying, and he liked it so much and had a clone made. It was, I guess, had several that went to other royal families. And so the ability, if you can do it with animals, certainly, you can do it with humans. There's no great difference there. And then, people kid about, they're soulless and all that. No, they got a soul. There is issues when you do clones of clones of clones, because there is some loss of clarity, if you will, in as they clone clones. But the real solution to that is just get more material from the original and store it and make first generation copies, not copies of copies of copies. So
copies never as good as a copy. Yeah, copy of a copy. Is that because the telomeres get frayed still, or is that why there's a degeneration?
There's a lot.
Copy to copy?
No, there's a lot more to it than just that. It Just think of all of the technological advances that we've seen in the last 100 years, 50 years, 20 years. The amount of change and advancement in technology is stunning. And part of the problem, look at AI, for example. In the AI world, I'm doing a broadcast. I'm live. Thanks, bro. I'm here today. You didn't realize I was on the phone. If you look at the technological changes that have happened just in the last couple of years, they're stunning. But we're nowhere close to where we're going to end up. Imagine what's happened in the last 100 years now being compounded and happening a doubling of that nature, say in the next 20 in many areas. Whether it's science, the ability to manipulate the genome is getting more and more precise. You're getting blended creatures, chimera, where we do it. Say you've got ligers, which are lions and tigers combined, and so you can blend near species, but you're also getting other ones where they're taking sea starfish that glow, or sea cucumbers that glow, that have genetics that make them phosphoresce, and then adding that to mice, and it could be added to other creatures. The idea that you could do this with humans is very, very, very real. Is it being done? You can just about bet your last dollar that it is being done in places that are off the grid. And that's a very disturbing thought, because some of that getting out into the rest of the population could be devastating. There was a thing with strawberries years and years and years ago where they wanted to make them so they wouldn't be susceptible to frost. And there was all sorts of debate whether or not the changes genetically to those strawberries being eaten by people would change the genetics of the people or affect it in various ways. And that's a very real concern. So is there, just as a comparison, when they blew up the first atomic bomb, there were scientists out there that said it could start a chain reaction, and that combustion could ignite the oxygen across the whole planet and burn the planet down. Other scientists said, no, that's silly. That's the most ridiculous thing in the world. It's not going to happen. But they weren't, they weren't exactly positive it wouldn't happen. They were 99.999% sure it wasn't going to happen, but were they 100% sure? We were the experiment. Boy, didn't happen. Okay, well, we're glad that worked out. But who made the decision to gamble with the fate of the planet? And it's okay. And when you're starting about putting changes into the genetics out across the planet, is that okay? What change might happen that becomes some kind of gray goo that becomes a skin disease that can't be stopped? Which, we have lots of sci-fi movies that, discuss this, where something gets out and the whole planet gets infected, and you have just little isolated groups of people who somehow are the few that, survive. Remember, why did Russia go into Ukraine? What was the primary thing that was the driver that made them decide, okay, we've got to go? It was the 54 Biolabs, 54 or 56, I can't remember, Biolabs that the West, led by the US, had working in Ukraine. And why so many? Because they were doing local testing of bioweapons on Slavic people, including Ukrainian soldiers, that would cause sickness only of essentially people of Russian descent, primarily focused in that direction. And so they were picking people that had certain genetics, and they were targeting a bioweapon, if you will, with some kind of genetic weapon. If that was aimed at the US, would we have just sat there and looked at it and smiled and thought, well, that's not going to bother us. I don't care what they do. We're not going to let it happen. Putin did exactly what he had to do. I don't care what anybody says. If I was in the Russian people's shoes, I'd be, thanking my lucky stars I had somebody that was aggressive enough to stop it before it got a chance to get loose. And unfortunately, the Ukrainian people have suffered because of this group in Ukraine that are aligned with, monsters out across the West that have moved the war to their shores. And it's a terrible thing, but, I don't think if the shoe was on the other foot that the American people or the British people would have been comfortable with this happening. There's going to have to be, before this is all over, a reassertion of human rights by the people of the planet against these government entities and bodies that are doing these types of research projects, these types of monstrous things that put all of humankind in peril. And those that aren't abiding by the rules, they just need to go into prison somewhere. They don't get to be in their science labs and do this anymore. And the government funding, the Western funding, it's like when Russia invaded Ukraine, I'd been talking about it for over a decade with these biolabs in Ukraine. And everybody denied it. Putin had gone into the UN and complained about this repeatedly. And he was blown off, brushed off. He's full of shit. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We're not listening to this crap. And then slowly over the last, year and a half, the West, the US, NATO have had to acknowledge these labs exist, and they've denied what they were really all about, but they've had to acknowledge the labs existed. And Putin has said he's going to do trials in the Donbass, literally Hague type world court trials, tribunals of Ukrainian military, a couple of politicians and scientists that they have that were involved in this activity in those labs, as well as, other things. One of the other things that happened there was they tried to melt down, the Ukrainian military tried to melt down in a Chernobyl type event, one of the nuclear reactors there in Ukraine. This is in Central Europe. It would have affected literally, hundreds of millions of people and displaced huge swaths of the population. If it wasn't for the fact that International Atomic Energy Administration people were there, got word to Russia, to Putin, and then they came in and stopped this, you could have had a monstrous disaster happen there in Central Europe. So the actions of these rogue governments, much of it, I'm just telling you right now, include in this rogue portion is people inside the operations of the U.S. government, has to be put in check, has to be stopped. Very dangerous situation. One of the things, I don't know, I don't think I sent it to you, that everybody in your audience should really slow down and take a look at, that's happened just in the last few days. A report came out. The White House all along had denied that it knew anything about the FBI getting ready to raid Donald Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago. And so the White House, Biden doesn't know what planet he's on. Even, don't be fooled, even if the acting is getting better and the masking is getting better, ask anybody in your audience, does somebody suffering from brain disease, Alzheimer's, deterioration, get better over time? Do they suddenly, get the magic pill and they're fantastic all of a sudden and they're back to normal? So where does that happen? Get in the heat a little bit. I'll just move over a little bit. The clone puppy's got tennis balls everywhere. They'll chase him, carry him around, get tired of that one, want another one. he's got like 5 of them out here in the pool somewhere. Whenever everybody gets off the beach, we can play on the beach and it's fun. So the Biden administration said all along that they had nothing to do with the raid at Mar-a-Lago, and that it was all a shock to them also. Then there was some Freedom of Information Act requests by one of the media groups, and they got some unusual responses. Now, I had told people even the night that it was happening that they were looking for something specific. And I'd done a couple shows, I think Nino's, I might have mentioned it on yours as this was happening, what they were looking for. But it was portrayed as though the White House had no knowledge of what was going on. Yet the actual paperwork and stuff that's come out even over the last week or so shows that the White House had a specific request that the FBI was operating based on. It wasn't a request looking for documents that President Trump shouldn't have because it related to relations with other countries over nuclear weapons, etc. It specifically was that the White House was looking for something that Donald Trump had, which was critical to the day-to-day operations of the White House, the continuing business of the Biden administration, and that they couldn't operate without it correctly. And so there was an executive request by the president to do the raid for looking for something that was needed for the state business that Donald Trump had. In other words, he took something that without it, the White House couldn't, the Biden administration couldn't do their day-to-day business. Now, what I told several audiences, yours may have been one of them, even the night that the raid was happening, because I had people who were there. And I said, they're looking for the biscuit. And that's been reported in the alternate media over and over. Biscuit. The biscuit is a card, a little bit bigger than a credit card, that the president is to carry, technically the commander-in-chief. The president is like the administrator of the U.S. government, everything internal, and the commander-in-chief is for defense, protection, military, if you will. And so the biscuit has all the codes that if some type of an emergency arises where nuclear or beyond weapons have to be used, beyond being other types of weapons of mass destruction that we have available to us, that if that has to be used, the president has to be contacted, and the suitcase, briefcase, communications device has to be within 2 doors of the president at all times, or better said, the commander-in-chief. And I say that because it needs to be repeated. There's 2 different roles, 2 different hats here. People hear president, 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 but in certain conditions, it's a different hat that he's wearing. It's as the commander-in-chief. And so the biscuit is necessary for authentication. And so the people that are in these secure locations, which there are quite a few different locations, the most famous of them being Cheyenne Mountain, but you have other locations that are extensions of that, and in the broader operations, about 100 complexes and aircraft, especially aircraft. And so in the event that some type of response, retaliation, action is required, they would contact the commander-in-chief as the representative of the American people, and then he would agree with whatever action or not agree with whatever action was recommended based on information. So for example, if something's happened, then they come up with an action plan based on prior protocols. And second, let this helicopter go over. Little noisy there.
We didn't hear any noise.
So oh, you didn't know? Yeah, it's a little hard. In these protocols, then they make recommendations. We should do this. We should do that. We got to protect American troop ships, whatever, And the codes for authorization of that are responses to verify that the person you're talking to has this authority. It's actually who he says he is, etc. All of that information is on the biscuit, and this credit card sized item, a little bit larger. When they raided Mar-a-Lago, that's what they were looking for. Why would that be important? Because those codes in a normal time would change president to president. And when President Trump left the White House, got on Marine One, went over to Air Force One, and went down to Mar-a-Lago, he did not attend the Biden administration's inauguration. He wasn't present there. He was still president when he left Washington, D.C. He was still president when he arrived at Mar-a-Lago. And the suitcase or briefcase that follows the commander-in-chief or president was with Trump right up till noon, January 20th of 2021. A second briefcase or suitcase was used, and authority ostensibly would have been transferred to the second suitcase or briefcase as Biden came into power. And he would authenticate that who he is, and then he would be given the code authorization at that time. And this happens within minutes in the background of the inauguration. And there's protocols for that handoff. They do training when, the president-elect is getting ready to take office, so that it happens smoothly. So there's no gap in protection, of America, the world, whatever, being able to exercise the nuclear deterrent. The problem is that because of things that were not done correctly over at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, where he did not get the information necessary to complete his 45-day report after the election. It wasn't presented on December 18th of 2020 to the president and to the other agency heads. A proper transfer of power couldn't occur because for military purposes, nuclear and beyond, not all military operations, nuclear and beyond, a separate category of the weapons stuff, that could not be transferred until it was all of the proper checks, boxes had been checked. And so even though Congress certified that Biden won the election, that didn't meet the proper protocols for the transfer of the nuclear authorities. And so in the background, people have been questioning, even at the intergovernmental level, Russia and China and other governments, does Biden actually have control of the nuclear arsenal? Was it transferred? There's a case been made that when the balloons were coming over our bases here in the US, and they weren't up there at 90,000 feet where they could have traveled, they were brought down below 20 to get underneath we spray with aircraft a layer of very, very fine talcum powder type dust that allows us to electrify it. And the satellites, the spy devices are looking at the Earth, they can't get their LIDAR, ground penetrating radar, to work efficiently. And so it obscures their view. And so you had to get down below that level for the LIDAR to work, to do ground penetrating radar. And that letting the balloons go over areas of the US, and they were maneuvering, they could look at those bases and see that they were in fact closed up. They weren't, they were in a wartime condition. So the contention has been that Biden doesn't have the nuclear codes, if you will, and they can't create new codes because the guys that are in those positions, the codes are locked. Well, when were they locked? Trump, on March 15th of 2020, had placed these base locations in a wartime setting. He said, out of an abundance of caution, because we may already have been attacked, we may be at war and not realize it yet, we're going to close down Cheyenne Mountain and, by extension, about 100 other locations, pending, further information. When he left office, they were still in that setting. Those codes were locked, and the transfer of authorities to the Biden administration for that portion of the nuclear deterrent and beyond didn't occur. So they've been trying to fight to get that information back, those authorities' codes back. And the contention was Trump had the biscuit hidden somewhere. Technically, the commander-in-chief is to have it on his person at all times. So when they searched Mar-a-Lago, they couldn't find it. The FBI was there several days in advance. Trump showed them everything he had, all the paperwork, everything else. Why did they come back a few days later? Because that's when Biden and the Biden administration said that Trump had something that was essential to the operation of the White House, and that they needed to go back and find that. And so it was the Biden administration that Biden himself that authorized a raid at Mar-a-Lago. It wasn't done because they were looking for a criminal activity on the part of Trump where he retained some documents about whether or not Iran had got the bomb to a certain point or negotiating points or something like that. It was far more critical. It was essential to day-to-day operations of the White House. What could that be? It's the biscuit. The biscuit. And they haven't found it. When Trump got arrested in New York, they wanted a physical search of his body to try and see if he had it on him. And what they can't get through their minds, remember, to see if he was physically sound mentally and physically. And so in the test, the doctor gives him a test for brain function and memory and retention and everything else, and said, he was, in the very, 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 perfect, really, in his mental cognizance. Trump was demonstrating, verifying for anybody involved behind the scenes that he is in great shape mentally. Why? Because he has the codes memorized. They're in his mind. And the biscuit has been placed in some secure location that is not where it can be gotten by anybody else. Most likely left at Cheyenne Mountain when he had the mountain sealed up, and he was the only one to retain in his mind the stuff. And by the way, in the case where an actual conflict arose, a need to use this, if the personnel are unable to authenticate or verify with the commander-in-chief, if he's been blown up or something, there are protocols where several generals can agree on a rotating basis to proceed based on certain pre-engineered protocols that are well established. This is a very advanced operations, been in place since '54 with Strategic Command, which at that time was called Strategic Air Command, in place to provide the nuclear deterrent, the MAD policy, if you will. So I hope that helps your audience a little bit to understand what's going on here. They just reaffirmed, even in these last few days, that, and you have to read between the lines, that the Biden administration does not have something, that Trump kept something and he's not giving it back, and it's driving them crazy, and they're looking everywhere for it, because without it, they can't do what they want to do. They want to have a nuclear war in Ukraine, blow up the crime scene. They're looking for any excuse to be able to melt that down, and they're not quite getting it. So, and they need the distraction, the world crisis, to do it. And as I've said before, we're coming up on a Cuban Missile Crisis type of event, and that missile crisis type of event is going to be very dangerous for us. Be very grim things business-wise that we're trying to get done today.
You cut out that last part there, Juan.
Oh, I just had to move away from a little bit of the noise that was going on in the background. I apologize.
Okay.
Other business we're trying to get done today, so other conversations happening nearby.
You talked about, going back, you talked about the about clones, about your dog or your friend's dog, and that you could bet that they're doing it with humans. And this, you said people don't say they've got a soul or consciousness. Well, you said soul, I think. So if a clone is made, can the consciousness of the same individual go into that clone? I.e., if it was used in a good purpose, say White House, if they could clone an individual for security reasons, number of different reasons, could they infuse that clone of a specific individual with the same consciousness of that individual. So therefore they could replicate themselves, you know, in different locations and be doing God's work at the same time.
It's a little bit more complex than that. And there's, you have to think of the library of your memory being outside your body, and then genetics being the key code to essentially in a very rudimentary way the frequencies that access that. It's not like you get a perfect readout of what is in that consciousness. You might get impressions of it. You know, for example, twins often talk about they're thinking the same thought as the other twin at the same time. They can almost read the other person's thoughts at times. It's all over the map. It's not every time. Some people are just a little more in tune, but it's not that much different even than, say, mothers being able to know on the other side of the world when something has happened to one of their children, because they're very connected on the genetics. So it's probably better said as impressions. They're not sharing consciousness to the point where they can, say, communicate telepathically, or a clone can read into the box telepathically from a prior consciousness or something. You're in a zone, but it's not perfect. Could that change over time? Could stuff become more perfected over time, etc.? Yeah, it's actually possible. But you know, I think most of what's being said that way is probably overstated.
Okay. So you couldn't necessarily go into surrogation with another, or you could have impressions, but it wouldn't be perfect. It wouldn't be a perfect connection.
Yeah, you're not going to get the key code to something. You know, with exacting, you know, you're not reading those other thoughts that are in the box with precision. Is it possible, you know, that you would get flashes that would be that detailed? Yeah, it actually could be, but it's not, you know, perfect. And of course, that's one of the things, for example, psychics, I shouldn't say psychics, but Dorothy Allison was a friend, and you can go Google her or search engine her, an amazing person. And I had a number of just stunning experiences with her where she did things and it just would blow your mind. And but she needed, as a general rule, something from the person, you know, hair, toothbrush, something that had their genetics on it. And then essentially she was projecting her torsion field, energizing field onto that DNA. And then she would have impressions or flashes or thoughts, and then she'd write down, you know, the things that were coming to her, but they were really just flashes. And you know, reading into the consciousness, you know, which resides out the body. You're the person that is you is actually external to the physical body. When your physical body dies, that consciousness is still somewhere, and we would say that it's in the you know, subatomic field, Akashic record, etc. It's you know, there's different ways of terming it that may be accurate, but they're clumsy. And so she could get stuff. There was times when she came up with stuff that wasn't related to DNA, like where the chemical factory was in Iraq. And before we started the first bombing there in Iraq, and she wrote it upside down and backwards. She wrote an address in Arabic that was actually where the aspirin factory was, or baby food factory was, that was the first thing that we bombed in Iraq when we went in there, because he was making, you know, chemical weapons that could be used against our troops there. And she didn't have any DNA to work with, and got it somehow else. But, you know, I use that as an example because with the DNA, she was accessing by having something that had their DNA, which they weren't there. They were dead or gone or something like that. And she was accessing that lockbox, if you will, with her own ashes from that, which stunningly were amazingly precise and accurate. You could say, well, it's a spirit, it's a demon, it's God, it's whatever. I think it's more accurate to say that it was that, there may have been other spirits involved. And I'm personally very concerned about that. We had many talks about the fact that these and masquerading themselves, lying spirits. And so you're opening yourself up to those lying spirits. I had a talk with one of the tarot card readers here a while back, from a collegial type of a stance. I'm very concerned that people get sucked into this as a, some kind of a real art. And in fact, they're just being manipulated by demons with information. And it's not coming from, say, an Akashic record or lockbox or whatever in any way, shape, or form. I think there's a little bit of both going on at times. And that's what you kind of have to be conscious of when it comes to manipulating the genome by making exact clones or something like that, or trying to access that consciousness. It's just not that precise or direct. It's not like you're going to create somebody that's going to be able to go and get everything precisely. There is an aspect to it, though, and we had this in some of the early clones, one with a dog in particular, where the subsequent clones became more and more like they had some portion of their knowledge consciousness from the previous one to carry forward, but they also had physical issues if you're making a copy of the copy of the copy. Copies from the original didn't have that same capability to retain knowledge from the next one and the next one. And so there was a certain a breakdown that occurred of a clone of a clone of a clone. And the direct clones of the original with subsequent ones didn't have that carry down knowledge. I don't know if I'm saying quite clearly enough for you, but if I make a clone of a clone of a clone, there would be indications that there was knowledge that was passed generationally in later clones that was learned by intermediate clones. If I did genetic material from the original and then made a clone, and when that one's gone, I go make another clone of the original, there was no indication of knowledge from the other clone to the subsequent clone, because they both came from the original. There was no pass-through. The information base didn't seem to transfer. It was only clones of clones of clones. And then you have physical breakdown in the copies where they had greater and greater health issues. So anyway, it's too long of a story for this, but I mean, it might help some of your people to kind of get their mind around it a little bit.
Also, thanks for that one. Also, as well, Covfefe. So I saw this kind of early in 2020 and hadn't seen it for a while. It came up again, but someone was saying that Covfefe is COVID, Fe, iron, and then is it ferrate, Fe, and it was something to do with tracking and tracing from users. And it was, you got the change with coronavirus and then COVID-19 and President Trump said it was coronavirus, what's COVID-19, and Covfefe, COVID-19. What is Covfefe and how has it been used?
Well, remember, for most all of the world, this virus was a shock. It just happened. Who could have seen it coming? Behind the scenes, we had been very aware that there was a effort to have some kind of a event that would be worldwide in scope, related to a viral release. And there's all sorts of shoots in the movies, it's in everything else, but in the military, watching what's going on, we had this long ongoing knowledge of stuff coming in. Look, Department of Defense had the vaccine done in 2015 for COVID-19. So who did that? How'd that come about? On what basis? Because they were anticipating something and they had a vaccine ready and in place. And you're going to tell me that the right hand wasn't talking with the left hand, that nobody else knew about this? It was all being hush-hush? No, it's being done in the open. We've got the paperwork. That's what these hearings are going to continue to bring out over at the House here in the US, that this was more intricately planned and anticipated than anybody realized. That the actual event itself, a lot of the mechanics of it had been put in place a long time in advance, and but couldn't be stopped, not even by President Trump in any of his capacities, because it had so many bleed out locations. We actually did stop what was an attempt to put this out in early 2019 in LA, and then to cover it up with a radiological event when we went in and stormed the Guatemalan Cultural Center on Wilshire Boulevard in LA, and took materials out in 2 nest bags and put it in 2 different helicopters, shut down Wilshire Boulevard for half an hour. Miraculous. And you might remember too that just a couple days before that, 2 days before that, and again, that was a breaking the 8 number thing. It was going to be released on February 4th, which would have been 2/4, same date as Facebook was created. That was their plan, because it's this spiritual event, whatever. That was thwarted. But just prior to that, Nancy Pelosi, we were in a government shutdown. Nancy Pelosi had wanted to take herself and 93 family members, another important number, by the way, on a junket during the shutdown. And she was going to go over and visit Afghanistan and Egypt, and she was going to be in Egypt on the date that this would likely have happened. And Trump says, hey, we're in a government shutdown, no use of government aircraft to run around during the shutdown. And Nancy was running around in her bus with all her family members' buses, driving in circles, trying to get clearance to go get on the Air Force planes and go on her little junket. And it couldn't happen. Trump says, well, if you want to take private aircraft, go ahead, but you can't take government aircraft. Most of her relatives were from the Southern California area. Bug, and they're going to be out of the country when this whole event happened. We've had, when it finally came out and it was China. Okay, well, was that plan A or B or C or D or F? L, M. There was some kind of an event that's been planned for a very long time, and there was options for what was going to be, but this was a worldwide, and we're at a different level of a war than most people realize. And even from the anticipation standpoint, one of the things that your audience should be aware of, and you're not going to get every detail. Nobody has out in the open every last detail of this. Hey, governments have secrets for a reason. including the good guys, by the way, for a reason. Just speaking, what if? Okay, so for those that may be skeptical, what if Trump didn't hand over the nuclear codes? What if he and a small contingent of the most powerful of the powerful within the military related to nuclear and beyond have retained control, according to the 1954 code, the authorities that are the most critical, the last line of defense, and not giving it over to the bad guys, and are in some kind of war over authorities, who's actually for real, really going to be in charge at the end. They're playing a little bit of a cat and mouse. They can't prove that Trump has it in a way to go throw him in jail and send him to Gitmo. And by the way, if they do something to him, it's not him alone. It's the guys in the mountain. It's the guys in those other locations that retain authorities for continuity in government between administrations, not out through the general military in the ways that some people have been saying, but that final line of defense. And by the way, everything nuclear and beyond, that's Department of Energy. It's not military. It requires a Q clearance to handle, operate any of the anything related to militarized nuclear materials. So that's a bigger thing than most people realize. And within that whole thing are the other teams using other weapons of mass destruction in the biological or cloning, even the creation of other types of super weapons, such as superhumans, cloned individuals, even bizarre things like giants. We know, and it's been well documented over a long period of time, that the Smithsonian institutes and labs have been gathering up all the bones of giants from around the world and locking them up for who knows what use, purposes, etc. Well, it would only make sense that they're going in there trying to capture some of the genetic material. Are we living in a modern day Jurassic Park? Is that the contest that we're in? Something far more lethal to humans than a nuclear bomb, which is little tiny specks across the planet that blow up, and yeah, they have some residue and all that, but they're relatively confined. A genetic bomb, a Jurassic bomb, that's a whole different thing. So if you're going to have a standoff, if they've got islands where they're doing genetic experimentation, modification, creation in a Jurassic Park type situation, do we just got to go nuke some of those places? You have it even in the latest James Bond movie. Oftentimes these movies portend what's really going on in the background in some illusory way. It's Spectre, and that's who we're really fighting. Does that help a little bit, or am I rambling too much for you?
No, you touched a lot of things there. It was really interesting. But just in terms of Covfefe and is there a connection between the two? It seems like there is. Is that accurate to say that?
Yes.
Okay. And should we just leave it at that, or can we expound?
I'd leave it at that for them.
Okay. All right. Spectre. So I was watching James Bond just the other night. No Time to Die. I think that was the one before Spectre, or maybe a couple after Spectre. But
that was the final James Bond in the series for now. No Time to Die.
Yeah, and they talk about, like you said, about this thing with Ukraine and Russia, about the the genetic modification of how it could pass through. You know, they're describing the thing almost like the transmission of COVID, but as you said, it would just hit and take out certain gene types of races of people. So that was in No Time to Die. So the thing with Ukraine, because it's, you know, it's deep state, it's not the Ukrainian people, so they would have effectively attacked and taken out Ukrainian people as well as the Russians. So if that's the design of that weapon, to take out those Russian type, or was it Slavic, or maybe both types of people?
Well, that's not accurate. This wasn't aimed at the Ukraine. No. This wasn't aimed at the Ukrainian people. Some of them were being used for testing that had, the genetics to go into Russia. But this wasn't aimed at them. They were being used as a tool to go after the Russian people. And
but is there not a genetic, relationship? They're cousins, aren't they? So is there not a genetic close match between Russians and Ukrainian people? Would it have, would they have had an effective wind blow back on them?
There is a connection there. I mean, that's part of the reason they were there, but it was also populations within Ukraine, and that's why you had so many labs, because in different areas you had different concentrations. They were looking for local genetics, targeting right down to family members, knowing who's related to who's intermarried with who, looking for precise genetics that would be the most useful. They weren't going to get all of them. They were going to get some percentage of them. That's what it was.
Okay.
So, there he's got his tennis ball again. I told you there's about 1 billion tennis balls out here. Now he sees me. He's going to come up here and ask me to throw the ball for him. Never end. The clone dog.
The clone dog.
All right.
So with the Russian families, was that specific families? Was that royal bloodlines in Russia that they were trying to take out? What was the purpose of that?
Well, no, it was targeted at getting the genetics for a genetically targeted weapon that would hit Russia as precisely as possible. If you think about, even you saw in No Time to Die, it was precise enough to take out people within a family with exacting precision in the movie portion, where other people that weren't related, you'd be standing side by side, it wouldn't take you out because you don't have exactly the right genetics. It was a precisely targeted weapon. You could, take out a scientist or a government official with exacting precision in this way, because you had the genetics from, say, a daughter or a friend or a relative, or you got their own genetics. And so you might take out everybody in a family, that's still living precisely. Of course, the whole premise of the Bond movie is that James Bond being related to the daughter, it would kill the daughter and leave the mother. A weapon where they had the blood tagged, so that if he got out in the world, that material could go person to person to person and eventually reach the daughter and kill only the daughter, and all the intervening people are just fine. That was what it was. Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. It's okay. That precise.
So is that what it was? It was a precise group, a precise family of certain people in Russia that they want to take out, not the masses of the Russian population, but far more precise. Is that what you're saying?
Well, but again, if you know that, say, some Russian scientist, the guy that builds the best airplanes, the best bombs, the businessman, the oligarch, if you know the genetics of a cousin, and if you have that because, 3 generations back, that family moved to the Ukraine region, and you can get, and that he's related to so-and-so that's back in the Soviet Union or any place on the planet. If you can get those genetics, you could take out everybody with some particular portion of the genetics. And it might take a day, a month, a year, 10 years. Maybe the person isolates themselves completely, but eventually it gets out into the broader human population and it's a wipeout, eventually reaching that person and every family member. You know, we've got people here that want to reduce the population of the planet down to 500 million. That's what the Georgia Guidestones are all about. They've talked about it endlessly, repeatedly in all their conclaves across the world, that they want 500 million people on the planet, not 7 billion. And so if they can target and have a genocidal thing to get rid of all the people that aren't, you know, of a particular type, persuasion, whatever, then that's what they want. China did it numerous times. They brought down the population of China with their wars by 90%. In Indonesia in the 60s, Barack Obama's mom, Stanley Ann Dunham, and she wasn't really his mom. She got him. His birth mother was somebody else, an Indonesian girl. He was born at the Peace Arch Hospital in Vancouver, BC. When Stanley Ann Dunham was working in Indonesia, her work was studying and researching all the family lines in the various villages. And then when the war happened there in Indonesia, they targeted all those people that weren't of the right genetics and just cleaned house. You know, it's not different in Africa. You know, the Houthis, you know, they don't want one person of a different family line, background, religious order, whatever, to survive. So they, you know, it's got to be genocide. It's a wipeout. Using these genetic markers in these biolabs and targeting with exacting precision, if you get enough data, you could target, you know, their military structure, their political structure, their industrial oligarchs, etc., with some level of precision. And maybe today it's sloppy, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, with continued research like that, it happens with exacting precision. And that's the threat of these types of labs. How much of what you see in the movie world a decade, 2, 3, 4 later is exactly what's going on? No Time to Die may have been fiction when it was conceived and written, and it becomes fact today, and that's what we saw in the Ukraine. You know, I have an extensive science fiction library that I really enjoy. It's one of the things that you know, I don't get to read now very much, but it's one of my favorite things. The imaginations that go in there becoming later reality, whether it's watches to communicate with Dick Tracy, you know, 110, 15 years ago, suddenly are, you know, blasé. The Star Trek, all those types of things. Again, that's the world we live in. So a genetically targeted weapon that can operate with exacting precision to a specific family out across the world, as described in the James Bond stuff, is very possible.
Mm. You said data. If you get enough data, I was doing the code on that today. Data is 26. It's God. It's game. So it's, yeah, if you get enough data, you can create the scenario at some point.
Hey, I apologize. We started an hour later than we were planning on when I communicated with you yesterday. I've got appointments that I have to get to that I see my drivers just arrived.
Well, we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up now.
All right.
But it's been enlightening and interesting, and thank you. I'm noticing that with the movies more and more, that so many things in the movies and the ones that they're showing now, the ones that are being put on my screen are teaching me lessons continually. So yeah.
Well, again, part of the deal is in their way of seeing things from this occult standpoint, in their way of seeing things, they have to tell you what they're going to show you, what they're going to do. If they tell you what they're going to do and you don't do anything about it, there's sins of commission, things that you do, and sins of omission, things that you fail to do. When they tell you what they're going to do, if you don't do anything about it, then the bad karma's on you. It's your fault because they told you what they're going to do and you didn't do anything to stop them, so you must have wanted it. It's an evil, twisted way of looking at things, but they believe that God can't punish them when they told you what they were going to do and you didn't do anything, then you wanted it. Those biolabs and the ideas behind them are well presented in numerous ways. And if we're not going to do anything about it, then you must have wanted it. Putin took action and to protect his people. Look, I'm no commie lover. I don't freaking want to live in Soviet Union, or Russia, I should say. Soviet Union's gone. We won World War III. That's why when Trump texted, about the World War III thing, I would have said, no.
I bet. You talk about that one with that they believe if they tell you, then they escape, the karmic repercussions, and it's on the person that they've told. Getting rid of their perspective on that, a more God perspective, is there an element of truth to that? If someone bad or just life tells you about something and you see it, maybe people are fearful not to take actions. Maybe that's why they allow things like sins of omission to occur, or they just procrastinate or delay. Is there an element of truth in a level playing field of reality and of this thing of life that God has allowed us to interact in? Is there an element of truth of that? If you're told at some level and you don't take action, then it's fully on you, because there's levels of understanding as well. People don't understand everything.
That's true, but ignorance is no excuse to the law. God himself tells you, if you're going to do this, this is going to happen. If you're not going to do that, this is going to happen. That's Numbers and Deuteronomy and Leviticus and like that. So, you reap what we sow type of thing. And so there is some truth to this that I don't think can be readily ignored, denied, etc. And that's real important that you understand. They believe it. They're shadowing, mirroring what God himself does. And so I think there is a lot of truth to that kind of a karmic type of a thing. And certainly they operate with that in mind. The whole media industry is about making sure that you can't pretend not to have known what was planned or projected. And then, if you hire people as far as politicians, et cetera, to do or not do what you know is coming, to block it or whatever, then the bad karma's on you is the idea. So anyway, but I've got a blast, and I appreciate getting a chance to talk with you, and look forward to talking some more. And let's see what happens next on the journeys of the biscuit.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you see in the next week? Is there any critical dates on the surface that we should be aware of?
I wouldn't say the next week, but April showers bring May flowers. You have numerous whistleblowers now. Literally, it's a long line trying to get into the various House committees and through the committee chairs. to present information that they have on things. And that's very important because they didn't have any place to go during the prior administrations and Congress and all that. They were being blocked. Now that you have committees that are looking at the information, we have just an endless stream of whistleblowers. And I know that, and there's other stuff too in the background. I mean, I had people that were advised the other day to be on standby. That's good. Thank you, bro.
That's for the channel.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I love the colors.
And it's going to be 107.live.
Gotcha, bro. All right, bro. So that's an amazing, sequence of events. It's coming. I just spoke with somebody that flew in to discuss what they had been giving to one of the House committees, and pretty excruciating exact detail on something that is just going to be stunning. I myself, I think you can have congressmen jumping out of windows because they won't be able to stand the public scrutiny as the public finds out what's been going on.
Suicide rate.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very real thing. I mean, these people won't be able to. They're looked at in a certain way by the public, and there's a certain pompousness and slickness to them, and that slickness is going to be the slime of the snake, and they won't be able to separate themselves from what's coming out. I think that continues to get a tooth, and by middle or end of February, it's going to be all
February.
On. April showers bring May flowers, but it's still not
February by the middle of end of February. One?
No, May.
You said May. February.
I was mistaken. I appreciate you caught that.
It's all right. I'll catch that. Okay, so April showers. Yeah, showers is actually military 107.
And the only thing I would add to that is that this is a long process. Don't get ahead of it. It's always been going to come to a certain place. The timing mark is late October, and in a lot of what has to happen. So we've been looking for certain events each October, and there's been the option that it could trigger and proceed to a whole nother level. We've gone through 3 that were options, but weren't played. So is this the year that it all comes to a head? I believe so. But, again, this is a very, very big game. You're playing for the whole world. Look at the No Time to Die. The stakes couldn't be higher. And it's exactly mimicking certain things that are going on in the world with us right now. So take a deep breath. Let's stay with the fight, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Juan. April showers is 163, which is 23. So you've always said
anything with 23 affects the whole world. And by the way, it takes 23 chromosomes from each parent to make a new human. All right. So, all right, folks.
23 plus 23 is 46, which is best, which is dove, which is body. And that's, 23 from each parent. And plus JFK was 46 and 63. You say about October 78, Kennedy, Genesis 78. So maybe we'll get to the Genesis Kennedy moment will be in October.
Yep, could be. Let's hope.
Let's hope. Thanks, Juan. We'll put your links below so people can get the jackets, and also people at the beginning saw this, but if you're interested, I've been using the MirrorMate laser cold laser wristwatch, and it's
actually
cleans your blood.
I could talk on that more. Maybe the next show or something. I'll talk on some of the physics behind some of that. That's kind of interesting. And then also
we'd like that.
over at Jen's site, thejennifermac.com. You got to add the beginning, thejennifermac.com. She's got the Trump as the Megador, not just the jackets but flags, and they're really cool. So take a look at that. Yeah, look forward to talking again soon, Tom.
Thanks, Juan. God bless. Take care. Bye.